Welcome back, my friends, to the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk of WilksWorld.com, and I am so incredibly grateful that you are taking the time to join me for another powerful DTH episode. Friends, at the D-Rate the Hate podcast, it's all about bettering the world one attitude at a time. See, we did not create the hate, but with your help, we can derate the hate. That all starts with gratitude and personal accountability. We cannot control everything that happens to us in life, but we can control how we react to it. How we act, how we react, no matter what happens to us, how we react to it makes the difference. Friends, there is only one good thing about a bad attitude, and that is that we have the ability as individuals to change it. Here on the DTH podcast, we strive to bring you great guests and provide tools to do just that. Please be sure to share it with your friends. Subscribe if you haven't done so. Ratings and feedback are always greatly appreciated. And with that, let's get to this week's episode. When I look back over my life, one of the things that I remember most is those who struggled most. And those who struggled most, as I remember it, are those whose fathers were either there and not engaged or not there at all. One of the greatest crises we face in this country today is the number of children who are growing up without a father that is present in their life, a father that is truly engaged in the raising of that child. The statistics out there based on the ramifications of this crisis are staggering. Just absolutely disgusting, absolutely heartbreaking. But they're all just a symptom of the bigger problem. The problem is fathers who are not engaged in the lives of their children. Now, I could do a whole show based on those statistics, and actually I probably will at some point. But in this week's episode, I bring you another incredible DTH guest, Ken Gordon. Now, Pastor Ken, as he is known to the people of his House of Light ministry, received a metaphoric 1-2 punch wake-up call when returning from a corporate business trip when his children were very young, just 4 and 7. This wake-up call showed Ken he was not actually an engaged father. He was a present father at best. Join me for this great DTH conversation with Ken Gordon of dadsoffaith.com and our conversation about the importance of an engaged father and why it's so important to the life and legacy of our children. Here we go. Ken Gordon, Pastor Ken, thank you for joining me on the D-Rate the Hate podcast, man. I appreciate your time today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here with you, my friend.
As soon as I saw the stuff that you're doing with your Dads of Faith website and how you're an advocate for, basically fathers and fathers after divorce, and more than that, fathers, the importance of fathers in the home and how important it is. I got to looking into more of your stuff, and I just got really excited, Ken. So I want to talk today about the importance of fathers in the lives of a child, and how it's so important, even after divorce, for a father to stay engaged in the life of a child, and why that is so important. So One thing I talk about a lot is the perpetual victim mentality and victim and victor. And that's one of the things that stood out too. So I was just, after looking through a lot of your stuff, Ken, I got real excited because I saw you talk about, that mindset of victim over, victor over victim, and then the importance of fathers. So let's dive right in. Let's start with what you do most, your advocacy for fathers and the importance of fathers in a child's life and why that's so important. So talk to me, Ken, about why a present and engaged father is so important in the life of a child.
Yeah, and actually one of the distinctions that I make a lot is there's a huge distinction between a present father and an engaged father, right? I really get sick and tired of people, giving statistics that talk about, fathers that are present in the household. Well, who cares if he's present if the entire time he's there, he's doing something else, right? He's looking at football or he is, looking at television on his Game Boy, on his iPad, on his, on Facebook or whatever it is, Instagram or whatever. That doesn't matter to a child in a child's life. Just a warm body sitting in the house doesn't matter. What really matters is he engaged? What really matters is, does he really get to know his children, as opposed to does he just know he has them? And I think that's really the
Great
big,
point.
that's the big thing, is that, are you getting to know your children? Do you know them intimately? Do you know their friends? Do you know what they like? Do you know what they don't like? And the reason for that is because, having a mother and a father in a household is really a completion, right? It shows young men what a woman looks like, and the right kind of woman in their life. It shows a young lady what she needs to grow up to become, hopefully, right? If you're modeling these behaviors in the right manner. If you have a father in the household, then it shows a young man the kind of man that he needs to grow up to be, which, one of the things I detail in one of my books is what is kind of the definition of a man, or what are the attributes. And it is being a protector, a provider, and a priest. And let me just say really quickly, because I think this is really important. When we talk about a protector, a provider, and a priest, I just want to hit real quickly on the provider part, right? A lot of men focus on provider as in bring home the bacon, right? As in, money in the bank. But one of the big things that we've got to be a provider of for our children is love. We've got to be a provider of self-esteem, or giving them self-esteem, giving them encouragement, uplifting them. We've got to provide that as much as we do money in the bank. That is, as a matter of fact, I would say that currency is the kind of currency that will last a lifetime. So we've got to be a provider, not just one dimensionally. Then I talk about being a protector. And one of the big things about being a protector for an engaged dad is sometimes you have to protect your family not from what's outside. You have to protect them from what's inside. And sometimes what's inside is you.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
You
Yeah,
and
no,
your attitude and your bad days and your curt answers. And, so when we talk about being a protector, we talk about protecting your family sometimes from you. So, the power of an engaged dad is it gives that the role models that are necessary for both, the males and the females, the boys and the girls in the house, so that they can see what it's supposed to look like in a functional, normally functioning family, if I can use that. A present father, he's just in the house. He doesn't really know his children.
Yeah, he's just a placeholder in the lazy chair. He's
Yeah.
not really doing nothing, not asking questions, not trying to engage them in, what happened in school today, or what do you got going on with this, that, or yeah, I get it. And that's a great distinction, Ken, between the engaged father and the present father.
Hey, Will, can I share something really quickly with you? Forgive me for cutting across you.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
I just want to say right off the top, what gives me the right to write the books that I've written, and to come onto your show, and to to give my thoughts, directions, guidance, input, whatever. It's not that I'm a subject matter expert. It's that I have failed so many times, and thank God I've learned to fail forward. And let me give you a story really quickly about that. Some years ago, I was in the corporate world, and I was traveling all over the world. I had a job that was global. And I was traveling every other month or so. I would go to Japan. In the off months, I would go to Germany. I would go to Malaysia. I would go to China, etc. And I thought it was so cool, right? And
Yeah.
I'm in Malaysia, and I'm taking pictures on the bullet train, sending them to my children. Saying, "Hey, tell your classmates that your dad is here," et cetera, et cetera. And I went to Japan for a 10-day trip, and I came back from Japan after being gone for 10 days. We were living in Colorado. And I was in town for one night, and I got a phone call that night. "Hey, our biggest customer is upset. You've got to get on the plane first thing in the morning and go to Florida." So I got on the plane first thing in the morning, and I went to Florida, got it taken care of, solved it. We're good. I'm flying back, and I had a long layover in Atlanta. And I had a longtime friend that lives in Atlanta. And I called her up and I said, "Hey, I'm in town, for the evening, and I have time for dinner if you're available." So she meets me for dinner, and I'm telling her, bragging, frankly, about all of the things that I'm doing, and I'm so wonderful, and I'm so great, and I'm flying, and et cetera. And she said to me, she said, and I'd known her a really long time. She said, Ken, she says, "Wow, that's really amazing. You are you're flying all over the world. You are being picked up in limos. You're staying in penthouse suites." She said, "But what is the price to your children? I was like, I'm sorry, excuse me. And she says, what is the
kind of floored
price?
you a bit, I suppose.
Exactly. That was one of those, like, I'm sorry, what? And she said, what is the price to your children? She says, basically, you are an absentee father. And I got so angry with her. I was like, how dare you? But the truth of the matter is, she was right. I was a present father at best, an absentee father for real. And it dawned on me, wow, my daughter at the time was 4 years old. My son was 7. I went back to Colorado and I went to my daughter's room the next evening and I sat on her bed and I said to her, I said, honey, I said, tell me about your school. And she says, oh, she was in pre-K. Oh, dad, this and this and this. Tell me about your friends. She says, oh, I don't have any friends. I said, what do you mean you don't have any friends? She goes, oh, I don't have any friends. And I'm like, well, why don't you have any friends? And she says, well, because, in the school where I go, I'm the only African American and my friends tell me they're not allowed to play with me. I was shocked. I was like, what? And I couldn't believe it. And she says, but I play with the teachers. And she wasn't even phased. She didn't even recognize the problem of what she had just said to me.
Didn't even see that was that was out
didn't
of the
even see it was an
ordinary.
issue. Right.
Right.
So then I go to my son's room. My son is 7, and he was in an elementary school with about 500 kids. He was the only African American in the school. And I said to him, I said, hey, how's school going? And he says, oh, it's going okay. I didn't get beat up yesterday. I said, what'd you say? He goes, I didn't get beat up. I said, what are you talking about? And he says, well, I get beat up a lot at school. I said, why? He says, well, they call me names and they say I'm different and they beat me up. I didn't know any of that. I was so ashamed. And it came flying. I mean, just like a brick to the head. You're not an engaged dad. You're not a dad. You are present in absent, like she said, an absentee father at best. And so I learned, and that was when my children were 4 and 7. I learned in that moment why it was so important to have fathers in your lives. And I moved my family out of Colorado to New Jersey, which is where I'm from, to the same town where I grew up. And I left my job in corporate America and I went to work working for Bed Bath & Beyond, stocking shelves, just so that I could be with my children every day, every night. Take my daughter to cheerleading practices or cheerleading rehearsals, and my son to football practices, etc. And, there's a lot of days when I look at people who I came along with and they're a lot further corporately than I am. But it doesn't bother me because I had to make the move that I did at the time because I was not the right dad for my children. And so when I write about a present versus an engaged dad, I write about it because been there, done that.
In ways, Ken, it's heart-wrenching because to know what it took to come to that realization.
I know.
Just the different little things that happened with your children. That had to be a huge slap in the face to you, and where that ultimately led to obviously was a much better place for you, and being able to turn that kind of life experience into something positive is something that I always love to hear about on the D-Rate the Hate podcast, and that's why that's why I want to talk about, and I'm sure that led to what you're talking about, that victor over victim mindset, because it's a double-edged sword, that word victim and that victor thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you start off and your kids didn't even realize at that time the kind of victims they were or what they were a victim of,
right?
But you knew at that point that, number one, you had to teach them, and you had to become that engaged father.
Right.
But number two, that if that kind of thing continued, that things were going to continue getting worse in their life. And I talk a lot about the perpetual victim mentality and what victimhood does to a person, and how getting out of that victimhood mentality is so important, because ultimately you end up just seeking out points of affirmation and things go downhill from there. So
yeah, right.
I love the importance of you as a father taking on, giving up what you thought was your role, what you thought should be your role.
Right.
the fact that it took somebody, completely foreign to your situation, or, she was a friend or whatever, but that slap in the face for you
Yes.
led to another slap in the face from your children.
Right.
And you ultimately ended up doing this, taking your life, the trajectory of your life in a totally different path.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful thing. It's an important thing. And, so, I mean, there are obviously different ways we could take this conversation, Ken. I mean,
right.
we could talk about, well, we could talk for a long time, I'm sure, but, we could talk about all the detriments of, the single parent household, and there are many.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what I had originally planned to talk about in this conversation, but now I kind of see this from a different angle, because that love of a father that you have, and realizing that, hey, maybe this corporate America dream that I had, and what I thought was right,
Mm-hmm.
is not right. And
Right.
now I'm gonna go stock shelves at a retail store that is maybe far beneath what I'm capable of, but what I'm capable of in corporate America and what I'm capable of doing in my own home, my capabilities are much better suited for the
Absolutely.
future of my children in my home. So I'm going to take that, and I'm going to
Right.
make that I'm going to take that and make that my priority.
Yes.
And that's incredible, Ken. I mean, hats off to you there. So let's talk a little bit about, though, just because, it does, I think it is incredibly important, that
Mm-hmm.
victim versus victor mindset. So talk to me about your perception, or what your thoughts are on that mindset, that victim,
Yeah.
that victor victim relationship, and how important it is to get in that victor mentality.
Yeah. And it for me, going back to what I was talking about a little bit earlier, it's too easy for us when we encounter these kinds of things to pass on what I would consider to be the wrong messages to our children because of the way that we see the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that was very important to me is to not allow my children to become victimized by my observation and by what I saw. And so when I said, "Hey, let's move, let's go back closer to grandma and grandpa," it wasn't with a narrative or a subplot of, what they told me. It was with a plot of, and basically what I said to my children is I said, "Hey, we're moving because it's important to me that you all have a relationship with your grandparents. They're in New Jersey. And so we're going to move closer to them because I want you to have a relationship with them." Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the reason I bring that out is because too many times we pass our biases on to others. We
Mm-hmm.
pass our feelings about situations on to others, and the others we pass them on to, but for our opinions and but for our passing on our thoughts and feelings, they wouldn't subscribe to that. They would not be a victim if that wasn't passed down. I hear people all the time talking about generational curses, and I hear them talking about things that you inherit, et cetera, et cetera. I think a lot of people inherit victimization because it's passed down to them, and they accept it. And victimization, to me, comes in so many different forms, and it plays out in so many different ways. But at the end of the day, I believe that I don't have any control over what anybody else does, says, or thinks. I can only control me. And I can only control how I choose to deal with the situation, not whether that situation is going to be different, change, or whatever. And so when I talk about victor versus victim mentality, what I really am talking about is you taking control of whatever the situation is, whatever has occurred to you and whatever has happened to you. You take control of that, and you decide how you are going to then live it, pay it forward, how you're going to live it out. Because too many times people do things to us, I mean, relationships as an example. I'm divorced, and I could become a victim of that divorce. My ex could become a victim of that divorce, and we could then live our lives in certain ways. And I'll give you a really good example. And I talk about this in my first book. The wife that I'm married to right now, her name is Leslie. Leslie is not my first wife. She's my fourth. When I very first graduated out of college, I got married. That marriage lasted 6 months. I should have never gotten married. It was done under false pretenses, whatever, but it happened. Lasted 6 months. I got an annulment. Then I got married, and that marriage lasted less than a year. She passed away. Then I got married. That marriage lasted 17 years, yielded the 2 biological children that I have. And that marriage ultimately didn't work. And then I married my wife. And what I say in my book is I've hit for the cycle. I've hit a single, a double, a triple, and now I've got my home run.
Right.
I bring that up because I could have easily become a victim and said, love is not for me. Marriage is not for me. All women are terrible. They treat you wrong. They're after the wrong things or whatever. But being a victor says, you know what? I'm not going to take the easy way out, the easy way of thinking, the lazy way of doing things. I'm going to challenge myself to be better. I'm going to challenge myself to think more of others, and then for me to react in a way where I hold myself accountable. Being a victor is holding yourself accountable to your actions in spite of what anybody else does to you. And I think that's critical. I think all of us can point to things in our lives that we wish would have been different. But are you any different? That's the key.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Personal accountability is huge, huge in how a person's life will play out. Allowing yourself, as you talked about, Ken, allowing yourself to become powerless over situations that you have no control over.
Right.
And then allowing that victim mindset to take over. Again, that victim mindset will then start to manifest itself into more victimhood situations.
And you'll pass it down too.
You pass it down. Generational victimhood, like you talked about. I don't think people realize how important that point is. And that's why I talk about it so much on the D-Rate the Hate podcast. We don't have the ability, or we don't have control over everything that happens in our life or the world in which we live. We just don't. There is so many things out there that we just have no control over. But the key, as you said, Ken, is how you are going to react to it. What are you going to do as a result of and as a reaction to those things that you have no control over? Are you going to just say, I'm powerless over this, I'm miserable, people are evil, I can't do anything, so I am just going to remain a victim and just continue to seek out points of affirmation in my victimhood? Or are you going to say, I am powerless over what happened, I am not powerless over how I'm going to react?
Exactly.
That it's such an important point. And whether it be with the idea of marriage and saying, I've been there, I know what you're talking about, when you look at it and say, oh no, all women are evil, because I seem to gravitate towards, whether it be, the kind that are whatever, it doesn't matter. We don't need to get into that.
Right.
Or you can say, you know what? I have the power to choose, and I am going to choose to be happy, and I am not going to settle for less than what I deserve.
Right.
And life, just that mindset thing really starts to change things around.
It does.
I mean, it's so important, those points that people make, and how many different areas of life that falls into. I don't care if it's relationships with your spouse or your significant other, your relationship with your children, the things that you do at work. There are so many things that we have happen in our everyday lives, Ken, that we just don't have control over.
Right.
So why give those things over which we have no control, give them control over how our life is going to be? And So that's it's an incredible point. I've talked about it several times on the podcast, and that's one of the biggest reasons I do this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
That personal accountability factor
Right.
in that part of our lives could not be more important.
Can
Oh,
I
go
just
ahead.
tell you one quick thing about that? People often ask me as an author, about my favorite book and what book has meant a lot to me. And they often have to say, other than your own. But I will tell you this, going back to what we talk about personal accountability, the book that has probably been made the most difference in my life and been probably the most profound to me is a book called QBQ, which is The Question Behind the Question. And it's not a long book. It's an easy read. But basically what it essentially says is, it's so easy to point the finger at everybody else, but what are you doing to make things different? And so when we look at personal accountability, we look at the victim versus the victor. There are some of these things which are just so trite because we know them, we've heard them a million and one time. But the question behind the question is, but what are you doing about it? And what are you doing different? And to me, that matters.
No, it matters a lot. It does. It matters a lot, and that's a book that I definitely want to check out. I'll look up, I'll look that up, and I'm definitely going to link to it in the show notes because, anytime somebody talks about a book and how it's made a profound impact on their life, I definitely want to. And I do want to talk a little bit about your books. I know you've written 4 award-winning books. I know at least one of them is a children's book that just great title, great concept behind it. So I do want to talk about a little bit about that. So, but I do want to I want to get back to the importance of fatherhood and the importance.
Yeah.
It's not just important for that paternal relationship between the father and the child, but the ongoing ramifications. You talked about generational victimhood. We
Mm-hmm.
also have to talk about when it comes to fathers. There's obviously, like you talked about, an engaged father versus an absent father, or a present father versus an engaged father. There's that distinction, and that makes a lot of difference too. But far too often in the society that we live in today, Ken, fathers, if they get divorced, whether they were ever married in the first place,
Mm-hmm.
but these children are born. Too many are in this country today are born out of wedlock, and then the fathers are just completely absent. They have
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with those children that are born. Which, I mean, it's obviously it's a terrible thing for so many reasons. What do you see as the biggest problem facing these children nowadays? And not even necessarily to bring race into it, but these children today that are being born out of wedlock. I think in the African American community, there's somewhere around 70% of children nowadays are born out of wedlock,
Mm-hmm.
and there is a ton of statistics that associate with the prison population with children born out of wedlock. What do you attribute that part of it to, Ken? And like I said, if you look at the prison population, whether you look at black, white, Hispanic, anybody, the demographics are similar. One thing they all have in common, or most of them have in common, or a large majority, is that they come from fatherless homes, and
Yeah.
things like that.
So, I will tell you because I've looked at that and I've talked about that quite a bit, and I want to back up a little bit because I think that's one of the reasons that really drove me to write the book. One of the things that I've seen, and this is with corporate professionals who are C-level people, VP level people, all the way down to blue collar or whatever. I see that many men have not been able to figure out the distinction between divorce and divorcing their children. When they think of divorce, they're divorcing the woman, but many of them loop the children in with the woman. Where when I wrote the book, what I was trying to say is that even if you get divorced from the woman, you are still married to your children. And so that's why I said divorce, but still dad. And I think that's probably the problem plaguing so many people is that they think that it's a package deal. They think that when you divorce the mother, you have to divorce the children. Now, there are reasons for that I get and I understand. I understand that, in a lot of situations, men feel like children are used as pawns. They're used as ways to get at them. But here's my experience, and I can only talk about my own experience. As I was putting together as I wrote Divorce But Still Dad, I got to a section in there where I was talking about my children. And it just really hit me how deeply I love my kids. I still wanted to get the divorce. I still needed to get the divorce, not because I hated their mother, not because I wished ill upon her, but because we were going two totally different directions and it was not where I wanted to be and not what I needed to be. And I was not willing, unlike a lot of people who make this gross mistake, I was not willing to stay there for my kids. Bad, bad idea. If you're miserable in your marriage, if you have determined that it is not working, if you've done everything you can to try to make it work, don't stay there for the children, because children pick that up. And what you begin modeling for them is a negative impression and perception of marriage. But I made a decision that I wanted to go. And so I still understood, though, that I had an obligation to my children. And so when I'm writing this, it just really hit me like, wow, I really love my kids. And the thing about it is that I know a lot of guys. I'm in a fraternity, and and I ride road cycles, and I do a whole bunch of things with a whole bunch of different people. I don't know any guys who don't love their children. I just don't.
Right.
But here's what I do know. I know a lot of men who love their kids but don't want anything to do with their mother. Who love their children, but can't handle having to deal with their mother, and can't handle being used, having their children used against them. So a lot of them just throw their hands up and say, you know what, I'm just not going to deal with any of it. Bad idea, yes. But one of the things that I challenge men is I say, you can't divorce your children. Because again, I don't know any men who don't love their children. I mean, adore them. It's the mother that they don't like. It's that relationship that drives a lot of men to put distance between them and their children, which is a big mistake. And so one of the things I believe a lot of the reason why we're seeing these homes, because I don't believe that just because a father is not in the home that he can't be an engaged dad. I believe he absolutely can.
Sure.
Just like I co-parent with my ex with our children, and I did as they came along. I believe that's possible, but you have to be incredibly intentional, and you cannot be a victim. You've got to be a victor. You've got to lean into it. But too many times what I see a lot of people out here that don't understand that just because you don't want to be with the mother doesn't mean that you can't be with your children, doesn't mean that you can't be a dad to them. I think if we as men would really figure that out, if we as men would really lean into that, if we as men would really kind of own the relationship and say, you know what, my kids are my inheritance. My kids are my legacy. They're so important to me until I'm going to figure out how to get along with their mother in whatever way it takes so that I can be an engaged dad. Now, are there women out there who won't allow that? Absolutely. But here's what I truly believe, and I believe this in my heart of hearts. Women, by nature, I believe, are driven by security. That's what's important to them. And if a woman generally is using your children against you, it is for two reasons, I believe. Number one, she's so hurt by what you did to her, and there is no contrition on your part. And she wants to get back at you because of how bad you hurt her. The other piece of it is you're not giving her a sense that there's going to be security, that you're going to pay child support, that you're going to be an engaged dad, that you're going to be there for birthday parties, you're going to be there for soccer practices, etc. And when she gets that sense, then in her mind, she says, then I'm not going to let you hurt our children. I'm not going to let you hurt my children. So for me, what I have really started really leaning into is saying to men, if we can show that we are going to be responsible, if we can show and give that woman a sense of security, I believe the dynamics will change drastically. But we've got to want that, and we've got to do that. We can't be so easily defeated and believe that just because she makes it hard that it's not worth it. It may be hard, but doggone it, our kids are worth it.
Yeah, every child is worth it, and again, the point that you made about just because you're not in the home doesn't mean you can't be engaged, and I think that a lot of people lose sight of that. Again, you don't have to live there and play board games with your ex or
right.
whatever
right.
in order to be an engaged father. I mean, there are
Absolutely.
ways to do that, and obviously there are people on both sides of all broken relationships that that will have that spite and that animosity and use whatever you've done in your past or your past transgressions, whatever it be,
Mm-hmm.
against you. But for the sake of the children, people have to work through that, because
Absolutely.
I think the biggest part of that is for everybody to get on the same page and understand the the absolutely horrible ramifications that come along with, not to say that there aren't some good single parents out there, because there are, and not to say that every child that grows up in a single parent household is going to become a criminal or going to become just this bad seed, because that's
Mm-hmm.
not the case.
Right.
More often than not, it's a problem, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not the case. But they do have to take that into account when they look at their children and say, do I need to get together, or do I need to get along? Not get together. Do I need to get along with my child's father
Yes.
for the sake of the child? Do I need
Yes.
to get along with this child's mother for the sake of the child? You have to put down your own walls and roadblocks and put aside your own
Hurt.
your own
Yeah.
pride, your own
Yeah.
whatever, for the sake of the child, because it's just because the consequences are so great if you don't.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Will.
No, I think that is so important. I think, and I don't think it's stressed enough to
Mm-hmm.
people. There's groups out there that say, "Oh, a single parent household is just as good as a dual parent household." Not true. Not true in any society on the planet is that true. You know, and I think people need to understand the ramifications of that single parent household, and not having an engaged father, not having that security. I don't want to say a security blanket, but that security, that strong
Yeah.
parental figure, from the paternal side and the maternal side. They're both incredibly important. Every child needs both to become a well balanced and a victor in life. Really, if you will.
Absolutely. Hey,
So
hey, Will, one quick thing I will tell you. Here's what I say to men about that. You've got to love your children more than you hate their mother.
that is a very, very profound way to say it, Kent.
Yeah.
It's that is because there is a lot of hate, and I don't care what I speak out against hate in every fashion all the
Mm-hmm.
time, and there's nothing ever good comes of hate,
Ever.
and sometimes it just takes setting aside your own wishes, your own pride, your own vulnerability, or just allowing your vulnerability to come out and say, yes, I love my children more than I hate my ex, so I
Mm-hmm.
am going to do
Right.
whatever it takes to be that engaged father, so that my children do not end up in generational victimhood,
That's right.
generational poverty, generational mental instability, because
Right.
all of those things are much, much greater in those homes without the father, without both
Absolutely.
parents. Both
Absolutely.
parents are so incredibly important in the life of a child. Ken, let's we're getting closer to the end of our time here together, and it's been a great conversation. Like I said, there's so many directions we could have taken this, and,
Right.
and we can do that in another conversation. But before we wrap this one up, Ken, I do want to tell people about the books that you've written, because
Okay.
you've got 4 award-winning books out there. Like I said, I know at least one of them is a children's book. They've
Mm-hmm.
all got to do with fatherhood, which we agree are so incredibly important in the life of a child. So talk to me about the books that you've written, and what it was, what your intention was with writing these books, and how writing them has changed your life.
Okay. It all started when I was going through my divorce, and I was a minister, and I was trying to figure out how in the world do I go through divorce in a way that honors God. I'm a minister. I'm not supposed to have this happen to me. but it's happening. So what do I do? And so I went looking for books to read, trying to figure it out. And when when it was all over said and done, I really couldn't find any. And so I wrote one. And, I write in the book really about the fact that you are divorcing your wife doesn't mean you divorce your children. But I wanted to base it on biblical principles, and that's what I did. In the book, my wife that I'm married to now, Leslie, she wrote the foreword, and she wrote it to women, and she said, "Hey, if you're dating a man that is divorced, these are the red flags. These are the things to look for." And then I wrote about unnecessary wars. And you said a little bit earlier, we unnecessarily go to war on so many different things. I talked about how many times we end up in marriages, not because it was God given, but because we did it based on lust or our eyes or any number of different things. I talk about what it means to be a man. I talk about how to choose a mate. But one of the things I also talked about is I asked my daughter, who was 12, can you write a chapter in this book to tell parents how children feel when divorce comes to their door? And she wrote it, and it was so impactful. And then I write a chapter to children. It was so cathartic for me to be able to do this because I was really burdened by the fact that the narrative about men is that we don't care about our children. That, when divorce comes, we just run the other way. We go get, a young 20 something and we go on about our business. And I said, no, that's not how it's supposed to be. And we've got to still be a dad, even though we are divorced. And so that prompted that. But in the midst of writing that book, as I was talking about my children and my relationship, it just really hit me how deeply I love my children. I mentioned that earlier. And then came the second book, The Love of a Father. And that really talked about how men really do love our children. We just do it differently. It looks different. It doesn't mean it's worse. It doesn't mean it's better. It's just different. The way a mother loves a child and the way a father loves a child, they're both equally as strong, but they just play out differently. And so I wrote about that. I wrote about the psychology of it. And then, in part one, and then in part two, I gave 5 examples from the Bible about 5 fathers in the Bible that were great fathers. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, look, I'm a minister, I'm a pastor, but that doesn't mean you have to be. The Bible is a book I reference, no difference than some people reference USA Today, Time Magazine, or whatever else. I choose to reference it. And if you don't choose to read it or reference it, then just, okay, disregard it. But nonetheless, that happens to be kind of my center. And then the fun thing that I did in that book is I went to 25 different men, all different races, different ages, and I gave them a quiz about fatherhood, and I asked them to fill it out. 25 men, 22 of them returned it. Again, all different races, ethnicities, et cetera. And then I published all of them in the back of that book. And one Saturday morning after I had written the book, Leslie and I are sitting at breakfast. It's 10 o'clock in the morning, and Leslie turns to me and says, "You need to write a children's book." And I said, "About what?" And she said, "About the power of an engaged dad." I said, I can't talk to children. And she said, "No, you need to write it." And by 6 o'clock that evening, I had written the book. And name of the book is Pancake Dad. But not only had I written the book, but I had also planned out 12 total books. And I call it my 12 book Engaged Dad series. And book number 1 is Pancake Dad. Book number 2 is Ice Cream Dad. That was released 2 months ago. So that's now available as well. But here's the thing. There are 5 threads throughout every single one of these 12 books, that I'm writing. And the first one is about it highlights the power of an engaged dad. The second thing talks about the power of a man modeling to his sons what manhood looks like. The third one is the power of a man empowering his daughter and being a woman and what that looks like and what she should expect and demand. The fourth thread in it is a father affirming and honoring the queen of his life, which is, I shouldn't say the queen of his life, but the mother of his children. Because even if you're not married to her, she still gave you the greatest gift you can ever have, and that is your children. Mm-hmm. And then the final one is a man leading his family in relationship with the higher power. Whatever you call that higher power, whatever it is, as long as there's something there, because having that higher power gives us hope. And so that thread, it does. That thread passes through all of the books. So you'll see it in Pancake Dad. You'll see it in Ice Cream Dad. The next one coming out is Pizza Dad. I've already written it. It's being illustrated. I've already started writing Date Night Dad. That's the next one. And then it goes on from there. So those are all the books in the series. The fifth book that I've written, and you alluded to it a little bit more, is not really about fatherhood. It's really about my personal experience when it comes to victimization and being a victor. And it is a fictional book that I wrote that has to do with how to overcome victimization and not fall into that easy trap. So those are the books that I've written. As you said, you can find them on dadsfaith.com or Amazon or whatever. But that's kind of where I am. More to come, but that's where I am right now.
Well, congratulations on that. And I know I know you're going to find great success, but more than that, I think it's important, just the message alone, because I think anything we can do, Ken, as men and as human beings, really, to engage more dads, have more dads engaged in the lives of their children, stress the importance of that engagement and that love for our children, despite what outside forces they be, whether they be a very difficult mother or a job or the environment in which we live or whatever. There are always going to be things in our lives that we have no control over.
Always.
But the things that we do have control over, we've got to get those right, Ken. And you're helping people get it right. You're helping people get it right with the tools that you're putting in front of them and the books that you've written and all the things that you're doing at Dads of Faith. And it's important work, and I'm appreciating the fact that you're doing it, and I appreciate the fact that we got to have this conversation. It's always a pleasure for me to find people that are out there better in the world in which we live, and I thank you for all you're doing, Ken.
And thank you for all you're doing as well, Wilk. It's important.
Friends, there is very little as important in the life and the future of a child than to have an engaged father. There is little in life that is as important for the legacy of a man than to be a good and engaged father. If you want to find out more about Pastor Ken and his works, his books, his ministry, find Pastor Ken at dadsoffaith.com. And you can definitely check out the show notes to find Ken on social media. Friends, if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. Share it with your friends, share it far and wide. And of course, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe right from our website so you can get the D-Rate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. So this is Wilk wrapping up for the week saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. If there is something that you would like to share with me, you can catch me on most social media platforms, or you can email me directly, wilk@wilksworld.com. With that, my friends, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.